Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Real Talk with Ben podcast. And if you're new here or you're new to listen to the podcast or even watching on YouTube, my name is Ben, and this podcast really just involves me talking about anything that's on my heart, things that are going on here in Hungary with my ministry, or even just things that I've read in the news that I really feel passionate about and I want to talk about. And so I wanted to start off this episode by just thanking you all for the support. I know of last episode, but then also just, it's kind of crazy. This is episode 28, and it's just kind of crazy that the support I've gotten and the even some of the advice I've gotten from parents and family and stuff like that on how it could be better. And I really do appreciate that. But I also want to talk about this, and it's funny, a question that I get a lot when it comes to this podcast is like, why did you start a podcast? And like, where did the idea come from? And it's kind of cool because I was trying to think of different things to talk about this episode. And I realized, last episode I talked about the Bowden experience and what that brand was and why I decided to start that YouTube channel and the journey it kind of took. But I felt that I really left out kind of a big portion of part of the Bowden experience and part of what it's become, which is this podcast and also my other podcast that I have done that's on a break right now. But so it's been kind of interesting because I wanted to talk about something that's related. I always like to talk about things in the same week that are related. It's kind of weird sometimes to talk about two different things. So I felt this really went well with the Bowden experience episode, and so. Yeah, and I get a question, those questions that I get a lot, and it's been kind of interesting to answer because if the person knows me, then it's pretty easy to figure out why I do it. But if they don't know me, then obviously it's a little harder to understand. And so I'm going to take the road that you're in the middle, that you might know me a little bit, but you might not know a lot about me. And so I thought I would take today, what was that Southern accent? Take today and just share with you, why I started this podcast, the purpose of this podcast, and kind of like the journey that it's kind of taken already. And it's kind of interesting because I feel like I've said it a few times on episodes, but I haven't really said why, I'm doing it or whatever. So I just thought I would just take some time to share with you my heart for like vocal ministry or radio ministry, and I think the influence and the impact that it can have on many lives. And so I think to start, I can't even really start with talking about the podcast unless I go back to freshman year of college. And I say that because, so freshman year of college, I was obviously helping with the men's basketball team. I was at that time a business major, not that anymore, obviously, but I was a business major at the time, and I love sports, and anybody that knows me knows I'm a diehard sports fan. Buckeyes fan, Browns fan, Reds fan. I love sports. And so I guess to even back up even further, our school has a radio station called Resound Radio. And if you want to listen to it, it's on the Resound Radio app. You can download it at the App Store and Google Play. Little plug. But so I guess for background purposes, Resound Radio is a Christian radio station that's run by the students at Cedarville University. And I had obviously seen the booth and seen the radio station itself in the lower part of the student center from times I visited in the past to even when I was starting as a freshman. But I never really thought about doing radio. The only person really in my family that had done anything like with their voice is my Uncle Willie, Great Uncle Willie, who you all know if you watch my videos on YouTube. He passed away this past fall, and he's kind of the voice of the Tigers where I graduated from. And so that was the only one in really my family that really had anything to do with using their voice for a job or for a purpose. And so was just doing school, and I remember getting this. One of my good friends that I kind of become friends with through basketball was Jamie Dodane, who Jamie graduated from actually my rival high school. We graduated in the same year. Went to Cedarville. She went to play basketball. I went to help on the basketball team, on the men's team. So it was kind of cool because Jamie, she was, she's still a really good friend. But she had really loves, she went to school at the beginning to do like media and stuff like that. Or she started out something else and then she ended up moving to that, but she really loved that aspect. But it even goes back a little bit. It even starts really with my roommate at the time, whose brother was a part of Resound, and himself, David, and Amy, they all were like, I guess they've been trying to start a sports talk show, and their boss, Mr. L, who love you, Mr. L, if you're listening, love him dearly. And Mr. L, they all, I guess, were discussing about a sports talk radio show, and they had asked Steven, who was the brother of my roommate at the time, to reach out to me. I guess technically through Jamie had said that, I like sports and that kind of thing, and they were trying to find some people, and Jamie was already kind of agreed to do it, and then Josh, who was my co-host on this show for 2 years, he had agreed to do it. He really wanted to be in sports journalism. And so they came to me, and I kind of said no at first. I didn't really want to do it. Again, that was freshman year, which was one of my worst years of college. I was really about myself, and I didn't really see the purpose. But I did decide at the end of the day, I prayed about it, and I remember like mom and dad encouraging me, saying, "Hey, you love sports. Like, this is something new. Try it." And I think part of that too was because, I always got jokes in my family that I have a radio voice. You can probably tell if you're listening, I definitely have a deeper voice and more of that radio tone voice, which is perfect for radio, obviously. And so I decided to do it. I remember our first, I remember meeting everyone, meeting Amy, and I forget what it was going to be called. I think originally the show that we were going to do was going to be called The Buzz or something like that, because our mascot was the Yellow Jackets. And I remember Jamie and Josh and I all looked at each other like, yeah, no, that's not happening. So after like some negotiation, per se, we decided on the Full Court Press. I feel like Jamie and I won that battle because we both love basketball. But we settled on the Full Court Press, and I remember our first, we had 2 pilot episodes kind of like where we were testing out. And we didn't really know what we were doing, honestly. Like, we had obviously watched, sport talk shows. We've listened to sport talk shows. We'd never really been a part of one. And I remember we invited my buddy Trey, who I worked with, to do a kind of a practice episode, and we did another one after that. And I remember I was like, hey, we brought him in to be a guest, and I was like, I don't know what we would call a guest segment. And he said, hey, we should call it Behind the Sport. And that was like really the pinnacle of like, that's what kind of started us into really having a successful, 3 full years of doing this show. And because Behind the Sport was really the kind of, I think, the focus of the show. I mean, yeah, we talked about Cedarville sports and we talked about what was going on, but that was when we would interview people from sports teams to people from, the athletic department, coaches, trainers. And so that was like our goal. And so that first couple episodes was really rough. Our first episode, we didn't even do in the room that we mainly did it the whole time. We did in this other really weird room. It was like lowly lit. It was kind of creepy. Easton Bazzoli was our first guest, and he just cracked me up. But yeah, and so that was a very rough episode. The first episode wasn't that good, at least we all thought. Partly, I think for me was because I believe our boss at the time wanted us to like read off a script. And if you don't know anything about like video or radio, like reading off a script is great for like certain things. Like if you're trying to tell something a point, but like when you're trying to have a conversational type show, which is what we were trying to do, we were trying to have a conversation type show. It sounded really, really like just straight up like out of a newspaper. And so I didn't like that. And I remember just saying, you know what, I'm going to keep my notes, but I'm not going to read off a script. And that really was the start of something really cool. And so we did this show for 3 years with us. Well, I should say 2 years with us two, with us three, I should say, because Josh ended up graduating after our second year of doing the show together. And the first 2 years were just amazing. We met some amazing people. We heard some amazing stories. I got to hold a Paralympic gold medal, which was still one of my highlights of doing that. And just met some cool people and heard their story. I think a lot of times when you're in college, you sometimes get that feeling, if you're not an athlete, that these athletes are thinking they're better than you. They try to claim that they're better than you. And we were trying to break that stereotype, and we were trying to break that idea that everyone is still human. Everyone is still trying to figure their own life with God and their own walk with God. And so it was really cool. It was a really encouraging time to just learn and to even learn myself. And some of the highlights that we had 2 different producers, Matt Andre, who, Matt, I love you if you're listening. He was for our first 2 years, and Matt was absolutely amazing. Matt was one of those guys that he knew how to put things together. His production was amazing. He was kind of our producer. And it was always funny. We would always be like talking to him, but like he didn't have a mic, so we would just kind of make fun of him. But it was funny because I think it was Matt that started this. At the end of the show, we would kind of do a fun segment. I threw out the idea, let's just ask a crazy question at the end of our interview segment. So we would talk about that. But then at the end of our segment, our boss let us talk for anything for about 5 minutes. But then after the show would go off air, Matt, I believe, was it second year? I think it would be Matt. Ben was our next producer for like the next year. So Ben, if it was you, I'm sorry. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But Matt would actually end up, he would put bloopers together. And I'm pretty sure 90% of the bloopers were of me just being like saying something stupid, or like I would miss up a line, because the difference between what I'm doing now on the podcast and what I did then is like we recorded everything, and like I am now, but like if we messed up, we would just start over. We'd start from that point, and then production would go in and put everything together. Whereas what I'm doing is it's straight up natural. I don't edit it at all. I just add some music, but I don't edit it at all. So it was definitely like, I think, harder. And I'm so glad we never went live, because the talk was like after a couple years we'd go live, and I think I would struggle because I would just say so many stupid things. But anyways, we really had a great show going. After Josh graduated, so after my sophomore year, we still had a plan. We had actually another guy to come in and be the co-host, who actually also wanted to be a kind of a sports writer, want to be on television and stuff like that, which was great. Jamie was still a part of it. But our show kind of in that third year kind of hit a snag. There's things, I won't get into detail with everything, but Ben was our new it was going great. Just I think personal things kind of caused some shiftiness in it. We actually ended up shutting down the show only about halfway through the year, which was really disheartening to me. It was really hard. It was hard conversations with both co-hosts. Ben and I had a big conversation about it, and we talked to both Jamie and the other co-host about it. And we talked to our boss about it, and just realized the best thing for it was to just, put it on pause and re-look at it in the spring going into the next school year. And it was really tough, because those conversations I never wanted to have, because I loved and I put my heart and soul into this show. I love this show, and anybody that knows me knows that Resound Radio had a big influence on what I was doing. And so what was kind of crazy, to be honest, was that obviously at the end of the year, I found out that Jamie was transferring. She wasn't going to be back, which was really disappointing, because I really wanted her back, and we had talked about having her back in the next year. And also the other guy had graduated, so I was basically stuck with. I had Ben actually was graduating as well, so the producer was gone. And basically it was clean slate. And I remember walking into Mr. L's office, and I said, Mr. L, like, I want this to work. I want this to succeed, and I don't know what I can do. And I remember him telling me this. He said, Ben, I just want you to work your tail off, get things prepared, find co-host. I'll find a producer, and we'll make this work if you put the time and effort in. And I remember that's what I did. I remember talking with found a guy that was really interested in doing that kind of sort of thing. Wow, he liked doing that, and so I asked him if he would join, and he said yes. And then, long story short, I couldn't find somebody else, and I remember calling my brother. My brother was going to be a freshman, and I said, Jared, would you want to be this next coming year? Would you want to be my co-host? Which. If you know my backstory, you know that our relationship was kind of rough up until that year, and it got a lot better. And I knew he was in acting. I knew he'd be great. He'd be great personality. And he said reluctantly, I think he said yes. I think it was because of me, but reluctantly he said yes. So we had a team, and we found a new Ben. Actually, another Ben was our new producer, and started off great. Went through the year. We didn't actually start right away. We actually ended up starting a little later, my senior year. And, my goal of that last year, and I had promised Mr. L, was that I would work my tail off to prepare these two guys, or, at least prepare one of them to take the reins and to move on after I graduate. So the year was good. I mean, it wasn't, I feel like it wasn't the best year of show, because I felt like I was building it from the ground up again. And I was trying to figure it out. But I still think it was good. It was good quality content. Still met some amazing people. And then as the year wrapped up, my brother came to me and said, hey, I don't know if I want to do this. And I said, that's fair enough. You did a year. I more than respect that. And the other guy thought was going to lead it. But long story short, after I graduated, I went back in August, and I was talking to Mr. L about it, and he said that they were making some changes. They didn't have any co-hosts, but they were trying to find a way to make the show more intriguing, possibly do like an online version, like a podcast version, and just trying to do different things, which, if I'm honest, was tough to hear because of just how many years I put into the show. But I know it's in good hands. Like, I know Mr. L's got good intentions, and I hope it comes back out soon. And I hope they keep it going, because it's really been it was a blessing to just work in there. And so that was a very long story, very long journey story of why I'm here now. And so to kind of conclude that story, I really got a passion for doing radio. And also, I didn't mention, during that time I did some DJing, like my second year. So I would do like on air, be like, and next up is Amazing Grace by Chris Tomlin, or, whatever. And I would do some talking in there, and I really enjoyed that. I really love sharing my heart. And so as I was doing the Bowden experience, and as I was doing videos, and I kept doing them, it was great. But I remember I was watching some video podcasts, and I was listening to some podcasts, and I said, God, like, you've given me the ability to make videos, but you've also blessed me with a voice for radio, and I still want to use that. Obviously, I wasn't in the career, so I didn't go into that career, but I knew I could still use it from a platform-based scenario, and so I did. I was able to just pray about it, and I remember. It was funny because actually this podcast, Real Talk with Ben, was actually not the first podcast. If you know, and you've been following since the beginning, you know that the Bros Know podcast was our first podcast. I remember coming to my brother in December, and I said, hey, I was like, I really kind of want to get back into doing kind of a radio style thing. Would you be up doing a podcast? Because our relationship is just really funny. We're kind of opposites in a way, but we're very like goofy. We love being sarcastic. We just love talking about things. We like similar things. And, he, again, reluctantly agreed, I think. But at the same time, it was a blessing, man. I tell people this, that I think doing it with my brother helped me ease into it, helped me to figure out, the audio portion of it, editing and stuff like that. But I loved it. To get to connect with my brother, we would actually record 3 or 4 episodes a day. So you're talking like almost 4 hours worth of podcasting, but we love doing it. And it's been hard because you might be on, where's the bros know? Well, since I'm here, and he's back in the States, we kind of decided to put it on a hiatus. So we only did 10 episodes, put it on a hiatus, which is kind of a weird way to start because I obviously not being around. But put it on a hiatus. Our goal is to continue it in the future, or I'm trying to figure out technology-wise how we can do it, how we can record, and hopefully, hopefully record and maybe have a couple maybe spot episodes while I'm here in Hungary. But anyways, after I started that, I was like, I really have a passion to start my own channel, start my own podcast. And I decided to do it when I was trying to think of names of what to call it. I realized that one of the things I love to do is, well, if anybody knows me, I love to talk. But what I really love is having those real conversations and those deep conversations. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a podcast show that still I would have fun in, and still I would have those, but I would still have those deep conversations. I wanted to bring back the behind the sport concept of talking with people, learning their story, but also sharing my story and sharing my opinion on things. Even though I know people might not always agree, I just hope to be encouragement. And if you remember from last episode, the Bowden experience exists for family, faith, family, fun, and then also to let people see what God is doing in my life through what God is doing in ministry through my eyes. And so that's my goal. And you guys also know that I would just want to make people smile and be encouraged. And so that's been kind of my goal with this. And it's kind of funny that I talk about radio a lot because my dad always used to say I have the face for radio. I'm going to let that sit here for a second. Yeah. So obviously it doesn't make sense because you obviously don't get filmed usually. So thanks, Dad, for that joke. Love you. But anyways, yeah. And so that's what the Real Talk with Ben podcast is. The journey it's taken has really been, I tell people that the podcast really is pulling from definitely different aspects of my life, from doing radio. I mean, that's a big portion of it. The interview part is a big portion from the radio, from Full Court Press. The style I do it is definitely from my talking with my brother and having that podcast. But then my personality definitely comes out at times, but my seriousness comes out at times. So I say Real Talk with Ben is literally, it kind of really covers every part of my personality, my life, and I hope that this podcast brings you joy and it brings you encouragement. Even if it doesn't, I hope you can at least get some smiles through my smirky comments or, just stupid phrases I say or the way I, say things or whatever. Because I think at the end of the day, the idea of doing a podcast has always been kind of weird because there's so many people that do podcasts. I mean, you can go on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you can find thousands of podcasts. And how do you stick out? And I don't know if I necessarily stick out. And that's never been my goal. Like I said with Bowden Experience, my goal has never been to make a ton of money or to be in the spotlight necessarily. My goal is to reach the people I can reach. And so, how do I do that? How do I stick out? How do I make a difference? And one of the big things that I've been encouraged by people that are in radio, by Mr. L, when I was thinking about doing this podcast, and even my own friends and family, is just telling it from the heart and being honest and wholesome with people. And I think that's a big thing that this world misses a lot. And if I can do that, and if I can bring that to you and bring that to friends and family, then that's what I want to be. Sometimes, I know there's people that probably laugh at the fact that I do a podcast or why are you doing it? Or, those questions and those unanswered questions. And maybe they're right. Maybe it's a little crazy to do it. But like I said, with the Bowden Experience, I love doing it. And God gives us gifts and God gives us these opportunities to minister to people and to share the gospel. And if that's through my voice, through a podcast, and if that's through me talking on a video, then, that's what I want to do. And so people ask if that is underneath the Bowden Experience. And of course, this podcast is part of the Bowden Experience kind of brand and the idea of it. And so, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Mr. L, if it wasn't for Matt Andre, Jamie Dodane, Josh Burris, Amy, David Long, all my other guests and co-hosts and all these different people, my brother and my family. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be doing a podcast if I don't get involved with radio, 5-6 years ago. I don't think so. I really don't. At the end of the day, I think God knew that there was a talent of a voice and I wanted, and He knew I could use it, and I'm glad I was able to use it. And I know for my family that knows Uncle Willie, he was always one when I told him I was doing radio. He was always encouraging me, but it was very hard because it's big shoes to fill. It's big. I mean, he's the face of Tiger Athletics. He's been the voice of that, and so there's always that part of me that wanted just to be a little bit like him and to be encouraging like he is, and I hope I've done that. And so when Uncle Willie passed away, I remember. I think that also had some motivation in starting a podcast. Was I just wanted to honor him with what I do, because he had such a big foothold in giving me ideas and giving me his opinion about things, and whenever I would talk with him. And so I miss you, Uncle Willie, and I loved him to death. I still love him. So anyways, that's my story. That's the journey of the Real Talk with Ben podcast. And I hope you kind of get an insight of what went on in my mind as I was doing this and as I started this, and I hope that can bring you some joy, some, I guess, some realization of why I did it, and hopefully you can see that God has really used this for His glory. So thanks again for listening. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, go ahead and 5-star it, like it. Make sure you listen to it every week on Tuesday and Thursday at 8 a.m. Eastern. And if you're listening and watching on YouTube, go ahead and click the thumbs up button, and hit that subscribe button, and you'll definitely be set for future videos. So once again, thank you. And as always, we'll talk next time.